Welcome to CreativeMornings Cardiff. My name is Rina and I'm your host, and we're here at the lovely Skindogs HQ. Thank you so much for having us. March's theme is perspective. Every creative act is an attempt to share a unique perspective on some slice of the world. What you see and how you see it shapes your beliefs. So, what's your point of view? Remember, looking at a problem from multiple angles generates more possible solutions. So change your perspective and you can change your world. Our Fargo chapter chose this month's exploration of perspective, and Fred Gay Ramo illustrated it. Now on to our speaker. Rhinal, thank you very much for coming today. I think you, as I read out what perspective, or what our take on perspective is, I think you fit the brief so well. So I'm going to do a tiny intro, but I'd rather you speak about yourself. But Rhinal is from Wales and Indian African heritage, and started travelling at the age of 24 when she set off on her first trip to Australia and New Zealand, where she worked as a freelance journalist and film publicity director with high-profile people. She has travelled extensively for over 10 years across Asia, Africa, South America, Central America, Canada, Alaska, Europe, North America, Australia, and New Zealand. Okay. Wow. Already. Love that. And during these trips, she has lived and worked in different countries, hitchhiking, living like the locals, and learning the real culture, social and environmental issues and challenges of the countries that she has visited. And I'm just going to pass over to you because who better to tell your story than you? Thank you so much.
Thank you. You very kindly said the first part of it. So my name's Rhinal, and I wanted to make this talk experiential. So I was really happy to see that you've got booklets because it's got 2 blank pages at the front, which I'm going to give you some ideas to do some kind of doodling and writing things on throughout the talk if you want to, obviously. Okay, so maybe I'll start with the experiential activity. So the basis of my talk, I wanted to use this painting to start off with, just to kind of bring everybody into the present moment. So we've all had busy mornings. I know you've been networking and chatting, and there's probably lots of thoughts and feelings going on. So if you'd like to, you might like to take a moment just to reflect on this image and what you see in it, and that's going to be different to each person. How I see it is going to form the kind of essence of my talk today. And I'd like to invite you, if you want to on the front pages of your book, create an image of a brain. I'm clearly not very good at drawing, so that's my brain. And then of a heart. And as I'm talking today, like maybe any thoughts or feelings that come up from the perspective of the brain or from the perspective of the heart, you might like to scribble down, or if you like drawing, do a little drawing. So I've given an example. So one of mine was, I spilt something this morning. So, oops, I spilt something on my jacket. That was from my brain. And then my heart, when I came in, was, oh, they seem like really friendly people. This is going to be fun. So as we're going, just feel free to do that throughout. And as was mentioned, coincidentally, the kind of basis of this that I wanted is that, I mean, life is full of so many problems, but, you know, as the great Einstein said, we can't solve the problem from the same level of thinking that created it. So hopefully this talk kind of gives some inspiration and ideas of how that kind of perspective can change by looking at things from the perspective of the brain or the heart or the gut or the body, and just taking all of these different parts of us into consideration when we look at any situation, and then finding some balance, which can often help us to find a more balanced perspective and wisdom. So with this, the really important thing as well is positive or negative, anything is fine. So it's not only like writing things that, you know, you think will be positive and good, because part of bringing into awareness what's going on internally and our perspective is just observing it all non-judgmentally. So while you're observing this painting, I wanted to share a little story with you. So once upon a time, there was a little girl who grew up in a little Valleys town, and she was very keen to please people. So she's very hardworking, an overachiever. She got all the awards for being hardworking. She went to one of the top universities, had the option of going to Cambridge, and then at the age of 24, she went to sunny Sydney, Australia. She worked with A-list celebrities, had a high-powered job, lots of money, very glamorous social life, all of the things that she thought were what society was telling her is happiness. But there was a problem. She wasn't happy. And as a result of this, she experienced low mood, like anxiety. And this was fueled by the attitude of society that told her to repress her feelings and just get on with it. So she tried that, and it led to more drinking, more partying, just anything to avoid her internal conflicts. Until one day she found herself very lost, physically and mentally, in the middle of Sydney, with no idea of how to get home. So at that point, she acknowledged her chaotic state, and she decided to consciously reevaluate her life and accept that moving to the other side of the world and ticking all of those boxes that society told her to wasn't the answer, and acknowledge that she'd created a kind of false perception of the world and herself. So I found myself asking myself a very challenging question, which was, who am I? And it was this question that took me across 5 continents, more cultures than I can remember, and just really challenging all of those conditioned thinking that, you know, it's hard work that will bring you happiness, that, you know, it's going to be having everybody talking about how great your life is. All of these things that I'd grown up being told by my parents, by my teachers, by society that will bring me happiness. I slowly started to question all of this. Well, you might have guessed by now that person was me. So I'd like to ask you now if any of you can relate to this. So maybe, and you can maybe, if you want to, doodle on your heart or brain, thinking about a time in your life when, in the past or present, when everything appeared to be perfect, but something deep inside of you just didn't feel right, and how that felt and any thoughts that came up at that time. So one of the most important things that I learned in my journey of self-discovery was to open my heart and mind and finding happiness in the beauty of the present moment, which often we can't appreciate when we have so much going on in our heads. So my first life-changing experience was in Tasmania. I stayed in a little cabin, and the only other guest was a rustic toothless man. I was really intrigued by him because of his somewhat unconventional appearance, and he was really intrigued by me because I was trekking around the mountains in a miniskirt. So I told him about how I'd come to Tasmania to find myself. And he laughed at me and said, but I told him that I had a big suitcase and I'd left it in a hostel in Hobart because it was too heavy. And I was going to go back and get it after I'd been trekking around the mountains. And he laughed at me and looked at me and said, you really think that's going to be there when you get back? You do realise that that hostel is used by people like me, the vagrants of society, like homeless people, drunk people. And I was heartbroken. I was like, but my belongings, my beloved belongings, they have to be there. And I realised how attached I was to them. And he just looked at me and said, well, what are you going to do with hair straighteners and high heels on your journey of self-discovery? I, of course, defended my valuable items and said, they are really important to me. But actually, when I went back, my suitcase was there. But I realised that he was right. And he had a lot of wisdom. And actually I didn't need these things. So I slowly started to give them away. And I found a sense of freedom in that. And actually they've been weighing me down. So in the words of Jim Carrey, I hope everybody gets to be rich and famous and have everything they ever dreamed of so that they realise that it's not the answer. Now, obviously, when I say that, I'm not saying that these items are wrong. I'm wearing, these kind of clothes today. I'm saying that, for me, it was the attachment to them that I thought that I couldn't be happy if I didn't have these items. And that's what this experience kind of taught me. So I also learnt the importance of compassion. And when I went to Peru, I felt really lost and had a lot of very difficult thoughts coming up after leaving my very kind ex-partner. And I felt, like I had a lot of criticism that I was selfish, just because it didn't feel right, and that's why I left. And, obviously that was questioned by so many people. And then one day when I was volunteering, the little boy, the little one with the tie at the front, he looked at me with a look of such deep love. And he'd been left at this orphanage because his mum had a drug addiction. And in that moment, I just came out of all of my thoughts and connected to my heart. And suddenly my problems didn't seem so big anymore. And I found a lot of purpose in showing concern for these young children who had difficulties that I couldn't even imagine, and yet had such deep love in their hearts. And it really taught me the importance of compassion, both for ourselves and for others. So again, maybe you'd like to take a moment for if any thoughts or feelings come up, for when you might have experienced this, when you've had a difficulty in life, but you've intuitively found your way by caring for somebody deeply. Once I found myself being faced with the question of how do you question the notion of happiness, which somebody asked me once. I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, the deepest part of me always found a way of speaking to me. So sometimes that would be going for a job interview that was in for a financial company in the corporate world, and I thought I should do, and then falling over in a puddle and not being able to get up, or having disturbed dreams and not being able to eat. I always found that the deeper parts of me always found a way of communicating with me if I paid attention to it. So I was grateful that I started to understand this. It helped me to realise that I wasn't the crazy, clumsy person that my mind told me that I was. And I started deciding that I wanted to understand all of this so that I had more control over my life and that my life didn't have control over me. So I investigated different ways of doing this. And I found for me, just observing my breath or my emotions or the sensations in my body without judgment helped me to just become more aware of what was going on internally and confront the dark side of my unconscious that often tried to hide from me. So taking control of my mind and irrational thoughts and reframe them was really life-changing for me. So it would be things like, if I'm driving somewhere and just questioning, was that lady in front of me really an evil witch? Or was she a worried, caring mother who was running late to pick up her children? So again, this might be something that you'd like to reflect on, when maybe your initial thought has been one thing, but when you've taken some time to maybe connect with your heart or some other aspects or calm your mind, you've come to a different conclusion, looking at it from different perspectives. So at first, it was really difficult and my ego rejected it. But with practice and patience, I was able to stop being so judgmental of myself and others. So this was life-changing. My anxieties and sadness often came from my insecurities about myself, thinking, am I good enough? Am I rich enough? Am I beautiful enough? But I realised these questions couldn't be answered by society or my friends or my family. They had to be answered by me. So this gave me the confidence to face these biggest insecurities and confront them. And when I was in Hong Kong, I met a girl who was having some difficulties, but she didn't want to leave her life because she was scared about going out on her own and how she would manage and what she would do. And at that time, I was traveling on a very small budget. But I decided, well, let me challenge myself. And I decided to travel home with no money. And I used some of the techniques. So I donated all my budget to slum children in India. And I decided to trust the problem-solving skills of my head and also the compassion of my heart and my ability to connect with the compassion of the hearts of others. I was relying a lot on the kindness of others. I used some of the skills that I learned from a hunter-gatherer tribe that I lived with in the Philippines. And I won't lie, it was the hardest thing I ever did. But after experiencing homelessness, not knowing where I was going to get my food from, and hardest of all for somebody who had always been quite sensitive, rejection, I realised actually I didn't have anything to fear at all. And that was just my mind playing tricks on me. So this realisation gave me the confidence to live the life that I wanted and that I chose. And so I set up my own charity, The Pursuit of Happiness, the essence of which is guiding people to find outer might through inner light. So according to psychologists, self-actualization is the peak of happiness, which you can see at the top. But most of us wait for a highly emotional event before we find the courage to wake up and see the world with fresh eyes. But what I'm proposing through my charity is let's not wait for tragedy to strike. So you might remember or have heard of the words of Steve Jobs on his sickbed. In the light of impending death, all of my wealth becomes meaningless. So I believe world peace comes from your peace and happiness. And then it radiates out to find an outer might that has no limits. So this journey, although it was very challenging, it rewarded me with much more than money could have ever, all of the money I had could ever give me. And a Mexican artist captured my journey in this painting, which is my own personal way of finding self-actualization by balancing my body, my mind, and my heart. So this is very different to the old Rhinal who you saw in the initial pictures, who relied a lot on alcohol, had a lot of codependency patterns, and had an excessive need for external validation, for a superficial sense of self. But by going through this process, by facing these challenges, I was able to access something deeper, and meditation, that's been a really big part of what's helped me to understand what's right for me and make my own decisions, obviously taking into consideration other people's perspectives, but ultimately realising that I knew what was best for me in consultation with my heart and my mind. So my next big project is to walk the River Ganges and do workshops in the communities along the way. And my hope for this project is to inspire more people to open their hearts and minds in sometimes quite difficult circumstances. So the human condition can lead us to create our own internal prisons from our mind. And we get locked in past experiences and end up recreating them. But through things like meditation, or for other people it might be walking in nature, or doodling, like you've had the opportunity to do now, we can connect with our hearts. And when we do that and find balance in our mind, we realise there are actually many more possibilities than we first thought. We can look at things from different perspectives. And like we did at the start of the talk with the painting, we can see things in a more balanced way, whatever the situation we are facing. So we can look at the feelings of our heart and then the more rational perspective of the mind. So I'd like to, before I finish, I'd just like to go back to that initial painting and invite you to, if anybody would like to share their perspective on what this painting might show.
So first of all, I thought it was totally abstract, but now I can actually see a face.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you see one face?
Yeah, so I can see a face and almost like maybe an upside down, what do you call it? Like a peak.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yeah? Say again.
See, I don't know if it's because I'm Welsh, but I just see a sheep.
Okay. Well, that's new. I will be telling the artist that one. I don't think I've heard that one before. But yeah, okay. Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow, you're all coming up with really, new things I haven't heard before. I like it. Yeah, so just, and something, obviously, paintings are all open to interpretation, but the intention of the artist is, if you see here, there's one face, and then it's almost kissing the other face. And then if you widen your perspective, you can see it's shaped as a heart. And so that's why I wanted to use it, because it kind of, captures the balancing of the heart and the mind in one image. But, all paintings, yeah.
Well, when I first looked at it, I thought, I could see the face, and I thought it's like a kind of disintegration of the mind. But then it almost looks like the face is slightly smirking. So it's almost like an intense kind of exploding of thoughts.
Yeah. So this artist is the same artist that did the painting of my journey, but he's very abstract, and what he does is he doesn't have an intention when he starts painting. He does it in a very abstract way, and then these beautiful things like this come out that have lots of different interpretations, and then at the end he looks at it and he's like, oh yeah, it's two faces, and then it creates a heart, and that's my painting. There's one more at the end actually, which I'll leave you with as I pose the final questions. So to finish, I wanted to give you the opportunity just to kind of ask yourself a few questions. So maybe considering how your perspective has changed from the start of this talk to now. Maybe how decisions in your life might have been different. Had it been taken from the perspective of the heart, or had it been taken from the perspective of the brain, or had it been taken from the perspective of both? So if you want to, I'll just give you a moment to just reflect on that. So the point of this is just to kind of give an opportunity to bring these things into awareness, because unless we bring things into the awareness, we have no possibility of making other choices. So for me, I think my journey started with being very kind of mental mind dominant, and my decisions being very much from my mental mind. And then as my heart opened and compassion became very important to me, I kind of went too much the other way, and my decisions were too much from my heart. And so over the last year, I've kind of started to understand, okay, I need to consult both of these, because the mental mind is practical and logical, and the heart is, it kind of, I think a life without love and compassion, for me, it would be very sad. But I can see that only a life of going from a place of love it's not so practical either, because sometimes, there are certain situations and we have to kind of adapt to those situations, which we need our mental mind for. So that was kind of the point of the exercise. It might be something that you want to continue further developing on. And I'll just finish with the words of Jeff Bezos, which is that our only real danger in life is not evolving. That's the end of my talk. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. Thank you.